Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews, this being a show where it's about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Kung Fu. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I guess each episode, I haven't looked at the future episode titles, but based on last episode's episode title being Silence and this episode being Patience, obviously them being values that Nikki kind of needs both for her martial arts and because it's very fitting because that's what martial arts it's meant to it's more supposed to be like a centering. It's not, so it's when you kind of find almost like a calm in yourself, obviously it reflects in your martial arts as well. Once again, I'm saying this as some dweeby dude who loves growing up loving martial arts movies. I used to watch martial arts movies all the time. Plus I'm always fascinated with kind of that martial arts world, usually in the fictitious sense of I've read manga and watched anime based around martial arts. Once again, the philosophies of the 8 leaves, one blade school is kind of stuck in my head a little bit just because of the Trails series, in particular the Trails of Cold Steel series. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, but obviously for Nikki, it's about having patience because obviously she knows that Jilon took Professor Chow, but it's trying to get information on that. So it is a situation of she's kind of, because Henry's trying to tell her hey, focus, because you're kind of distracting yourself, which considering the circumstances, yes, anyone would be distracted, but it's also not just that aspect of her life she's kind of being a little impatient with. It's also her family circumstances because she's not making headway on the Jilon front, but also her family front because it's she's offering to help, and her dad's willing to accept her help, but her mom isn't. But it's because it's also, once again, still trying to find that ebb and flow of right, I haven't been around a while, so things have changed, because she goes to open that door at Jerry, and it's oh, right, Nikki didn't know about Jerry. The door is messed up, so they have a whole system for it, putting a not a spatula, but a certain one of their spoons to keep it in place. So she just wants to help out, but her mom kind of really won't let her, and she's trying to keep that door open with Ryan, but Ryan's kind of busy, and for her it's I know he won't probably be able to forgive me, for just leaving him, because once again, her leaving, because for her it's we were best friends, we used to talk about everything, we used to be so close, but Ryan had talked about it a lot kind of fell on his shoulders the moment she left, so he ended up kind of take a lot of stuff on, so she wants to remedy that, so she wants to hang out with him, but for him it's I'm busy, I'm helping people. And so Nikki ends up meeting Faye, one of his patients, who talks about just how much Ryan does for the community. He helps out a lot of people who don't have the insurance necessary to cover what they do. It's probably a lot like what Mary does in Batwoman, but probably a lot more legal, because obviously everything Mary does is kind of super illegal, but Ryan probably has a lot more legality with what he does, just because he probably he probably has permits and stuff like that to operate his practice and stuff like that. Probably he's kind of more, it's effed up to say, but he's probably more of an official doctor than Mary is. It seems probably, just in that regard. Obviously, but the notion and the heart, it's the same, of wanting to help people who kind of fall through the cracks of the system. But it's that Ryan's that type of person, and Nikki hearing that, the thing is that even she doesn't know that. Just to know oh wow, I didn't know my brother was that into the community, helping out in that level, that he's that important to this community. And but Faye's situation is she's kind of overworking herself, and Ryan wants her to rest, but things go bad when Faye ends up passing out. And so Nikki's trying to, find a way to help Faye, because Faye was trying to unionize the labor force, because obviously they're making because they work for King Kwan. They're basically a clothing brand, and obviously they make very expensive clothes, but it's the workers don't get paid much, and Nikki's trying to do her best to help. Luckily, having I think a very influential sister who kind of knows the knows and knows what and knows what's what, I said knows what would. I said that weird. But was able to kind of get her into a party, and at first she's like Nikki ends up ultimately talking to Brett. He's like, nah, I support everything Faye's about, like, and that was interesting because at first I was like, okay, that's not what's going. It seemed like Faye was talking about, because he's like, why would she be worried about fighting? I like 100% support her fight and everything. So then I was wondering, like, if the head of the whole thing, Eddie, I was like, not less he's the problem, because then immediately, like, afterwards, like, the company's like, oh yeah, we're going public, woo, and it's like, wow. And even Althea being like, company going public after 2 years, she's like, that's fast. And it's like, because something just definitely seemed off. But then Ryan, looking into it, found out, like, oh, she's actually getting sick from something. She's being exposed to something, and to the level she's being exposed at, it's almost like she's ingesting it. And so it's like, none of the other workers getting sick, and that's what's not making any sense. And so Nikki kind of investigates further, and it turns out Brett isn't the supporter he claims to be. He's shutting down, secretly sabotaging Faye's stuff. Because you can kind of tell Eddie's not that, like, hands-on type of person, because the moment, like, and that's why I'm kind of glad to find out, like, Eddie's not a bad guy. It's just, like, I'm sure Brett kind of keeps him, like, separated from a lot of stuff. So, like, a lot of the workers, it was like, oh, yeah, he's like, Faith, right? And I'm like, her name's Faye, not Faith. But, that's kind of the disconnect of, like, right, he's kind of at the top, and I think Brett kind of keeps it purposely like that, because it's like, I'm the one that kind of worked. Like, the reason why the company is where it is right now is because, he even says it, like, oh, like, if Eddie still had it his way, we'd be just, like, selling stuff out of, like, his parents', like, garage or something like that. The business would still be, like, small, it wouldn't be as big as it is, about to, like, sell and go public and stuff. So, but I really liked the whole, like, Nikki, like, breaking through that door. That was pretty fucking sick. And just the whole, like, learning her, like, remembering her Shifu's lessons in those moments. And I like that. Like, the desire of the future and the fear of the past. Or so I think that's kind of what she was saying. Kind of ignore desire, ignore fear, live in the moment. Like, once again, just breathing, go slow. Once again, she is someone who is like, on the Jilin front, she's trying to get results, trying to go after her. So that's kind of the future. The past, she's so quick to try and recreate the past, trying to pick up relationships where they were and not being where they are right now, like, in the moment. She's kind of too focused on the past and the future. So in this one moment, kind of, once again, like, I like the element of, once again, of just martial arts, of just, like, finding your center. And just in that moment, like, punching the door, and even her being like she has this look on her face, like, oh shit, I just did that, And I don't know why. I like stuff like that. I think that's so dope. And proceeding to kick that dude's ass who Brett had sent to kill her. But I also liked her being in the same room, kind of messing with him, getting him to finally Brett to finally confess in front of everybody, and even Eddie being like, Prometheus. So. He gets arrested for what he did to Faye, but also, because the reason why is because the company going public, they would lose a lot of money dealing with the increased labor costs. So that's why he was trying to shut down Faye. For him, it's like, oh, I wasn't trying to kill her. I was just poisoning her to get her sick enough out of the way. It's like, yeah, but you don't know what the long-lasting effects of that is. That could be years off her life now, you jackass, So things kind of worked out. Well, not kind of. Things ultimately did work out in that front. But this adventure also did bring Nikki closer to Ryan. For one, she kind of interrupted his date. And even Joe, being an activist, he's actually the one that kind of, like, helped get Nikki, like, the ball rolling, kind of pointed her in the right direction and stuff like that. But even Joe being like, I like your sister. Because despite Ryan kind of being mad at her, he likes her too. Like, obviously he cares for her very deep. Once again, they were, like, super close. But for her, it's like, she apologizes because she was trying to rush things. It's like, we got to get to, I was kind of skipping over the process where we got to get to know each other again, And so trying to kind of, I think that's going to be a nice step forward for their relationship. So I thought that was pretty dope. And the interesting thing is, too, like, kind of weaving that into the situation with their parents, because obviously they finally get Jerry fixed. But the whole conversation is because Althea was saying like, oh, me and Dennis, we could cover this and like get you guys a new refrigerator. And Jen was kind of like, yeah, let's do that, because it's like the money to repair the doors on this, it would literally be just probably as costly just to get a new one. But Maylene doesn't want to do that. And the question is like, well, why? It didn't make any sense, because for him it's like, why are you so stubborn about this? Our daughter wants to help but you refuse, but then it comes to this thing you want to fix it. He's like, I love you, but sometimes I don't understand you. And she says, and she's putting the photos up, you're like, because she's like, it's not a thing. Because I think Maylee is trying to hold on to the past, because for her it's like, it's not just a refrigerator door, it's like it holds so many memories. I think because Jen was kind of saying like, oh, we're in debt and stuff like that. So I think it is a thing of like their family dynamic situation isn't what it was. And I think for her, she's kind of holding on to the past a little herself. She's kind of afraid to let go. She's kind of afraid of what the future might hold, because I think she's afraid to kind of let her heart open up a little bit, because she is afraid that like, hey, Nikki might disappear again, and it might be years before we see her again. May never see her again at all, like, and I think that scares her. And it's like, this is this door has the pictures of so many memories of the past, like she's kind of holding on to that, and she doesn't want to let go, because I think she's afraid if she lets go, like she, it's easier to live and kind of reminisce about happier times, and then the future is unknown and scary, and I can understand that. And I think that's where Mailing is coming from. I think that's what Jerry represents. It isn't a thing. It's a reminder. It's a kind of a safety net, a comfort zone for her, And there's a sweetness to it. There's also a sadness in it that that she thinks that she kind of has to latch on to that, because if she doesn't, she probably feels like it'll all kind of get ripped away from him. And we also found out some interesting things about Althea. It seems like they're heavily hinting to like her boss might have sexually assaulted her, maybe potentially, because the lady that confronts her, I don't know if she's like a reporter or something like that, but she's the one that's been blasting. Because I was wondering if it was like something like related to like Althea's business or something. Like, well, it might be, because that might be like, oh, like she kind of went off, did her own thing because of whatever went down with her previous boss, but the lady's trying to get her to talk about it, and because she's like, there are other women, and it's like, with your help we can stop him from like doing this to other women. But for Althea, it's like, I haven't told my family, I haven't even told my fiance. She just wants to move away. She just wants to forget about it. She doesn't want to think about it, And I think that's one of those sad situations where people kind of turn things inwards. Like, she might be blaming herself, and and even if she's not, she's just probably thinking like, I don't want to deal with it, like, because talking about it makes it real, and she'd just rather forget about it. And it's sad to think like, and once again, that's the thing of like, I think because of Althea's personality, and she wants to make it seem like everything's okay, because she doesn't want to worry anyone. But I think that's also what she was hinting at last episode, when she was saying like, my life hasn't been a fairy tale. Like, there was something, there was like some sadness behind her eyes when she was saying that, and you're like, what was that all about? And now you kind of understand, like, not everything was like great and awesome. Like, there was some terrible stuff along the way that obviously, once again, probably Ryan doesn't know, their parents don't know, and obviously Nikki wouldn't know. So so it's like, she's been struggling with this. Who knows if that's something that happened it had to happen in those 3 years. So like that entire time she's been dealing with it, so maybe that'll be something we kind of deal with in the next episode, is that aspect of things. But another side of things is Gilan, obviously having the professor who knows all that he knows about the objects and stuff like that, the weapons. And obviously, most people treat the weapons as legends, but obviously not Gilan. And he immediately, like, I like to think of, like, she knows so much about him, but he also knows about her. Like, he saw the Crane Guardian family crest, knowing, like, oh, you're one of the Guardians of the 8 weapons. And the fact is that you have a sister, you have a dad who was murdered when you were a little girl, and so it's like, okay, that is like, I wonder, well, was he, maybe he was murdered for the weapon, but it was like, obviously, Pei Ling had it, so either it was taken and it was eventually retrieved, or their father got killed, and because because maybe Pei Ling was older. She was older at the time. Like, who knows, like, age-wise, was she, like, maybe, like, 18 or something at the time, and maybe her sister was, like, a little bit younger, whatever the case may be. It is this, it's still, like, a mystery, just, like, why, like, you're part of the family that's supposed to protect it, but maybe it's, once again, maybe she's always wanted it, and Pei Ling's always kept her from getting it, because it's like, I mean, you think maybe on some level that's what the story could be about, like, ultimate revenge of, like, I need all 8 weapons, because maybe it stems from her dad being murdered, and it's like, I felt powerless then, and I'm never going to feel powerless ever again, and Pei Ling just never understood her, and that darkness has been growing inside of Jilin the entire time, and so it's gotten to the point, like, she's just become obsessed with power, that maybe she's trying to gather all the weapons, become powerful, and find the person who murdered her father, which, if that was the case, I don't know if irony would be the word, but it is kind of messed up if it's like, oh, getting all this power to kill the person who killed your father, even though you have to kill your sister to get one of the weapons, So that's why I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure her father being murdered plays some part in this. Like, whether it's, like, the main crux of it, but, like, it plays some factor in her being the way she is. We just don't know yet. But I thought it was really interesting when, like, the professor was just like, like I said, it was almost like he got cocky, where he was like, oh, I know who you are, and he's kind of poking at certain wounds or something like that. I was like, that's interesting. Kind of but I guess it's because he's like, oh, you need me? So, like, I'll take that coffee, please. And then, so he's giving her information about where some of the other weapons are. It's like, yeah, this particular weapon's here, blah, like, you have to, like, get, like, a group of mercenaries to burst in there. And it's like, oh, so I can see the rest of the sword. And the moment he said that, I was like, what? There's, like, the sword unfold or extend or something? She's like, what are you talking about? It's like, oh, yeah, the scabbard. It's like, it doesn't have one. He's like, oh, yes, it does. It's actually, like, the sword can't actually bring out its full potential without the scabbard, which I'm like, oh, I'm wondering I was wondering, is it kind of supposed to be like an unsheathing technique or something like that kind of draws out its full power? Once again, like, when it comes to martial arts stuff, once again, because I'm all about the 8 leads because of trails, like, unsheathed, because those, like, trails, like, the 8 leaves, 1 blaze. But once again, if you haven't played the Trails games, this doesn't mean jack squat to you. But, like, not everyone who uses that technique does that. But it's a particular style of theirs. Is they're sheathing, another sheathing their sword. It plays a part in a lot of their techniques, especially in a lot of range techniques. It does a lot of sheathing and unsheathing of the sword. So it's like, to me, I've always thought that was the dopest thing, when you just kind of do the quick and you, like, sheath it back. Like, that's always been the sickest thing. That's always, in my opinion, it's always been the sickest thing. But I'm wondering, like, I was wondering if it was on the same level, but maybe there's actually, like, inscriptions or something like that on a scabbard that, like, unique. Because obviously there's stuff written on a sword, but it's also, like, maybe there's stuff on the scabbard too that, like, you need in conjunction. And I love the nervous look on her face. I was like, oh, you just poisoned him, and you're worried that, oh, he has information. And I even loved him being like, do you know what a scabbard is? And he was like, oh, no. And she's like, oh, thank God. Oh, good, because I was about to say, wow, I just made a huge mistake. And it's like, oh, I hope you enjoy your tea, you bastard. And just walks away. I'm like, wow. I was like, that was super close, though. I mean, granted, you don't know what else he knew. Still, it's sad. I guess he talked about one particular weapon, so, I mean, he probably told her all he knew about all the weapons. We do see at the end, though, she does manage to get the 2 blades. They gave him a name. I don't know what they are. Those hook blades. Like, he had given a specific name. It might have just been hook swords. I don't know. Once again, I'm kind of now I'm a Tachi Katana dude. Now probably more Tachi's, like, because I once in the past never knew the difference between a Tachi and katana. I'm a little bit more familiar with the differences now. Those have always kind of been my type of swords. Once again, I can mess with a broadsword every once in a while, but it had to be like a very specifically designed broadsword for it to really kind of really pique my interest. Regardless, that's kind of once again. I've just never been the biggest hook sword fan, but they're fine. But now she's got those. So hey, she's got 2 out of 8. And I also love that was just handled off screen. I mean, to be fair, it makes sense because it's like, oh, you didn't have to get your hands dirty. It's just like, because I was wondering, like, are you going to go into one woman army? It's like, no, like, why not just get hired help to like, oh yeah, I can get this sword. I can just like end up killing my sister, slaughter some people. Because we actually don't know like how she's able to do what she does, like what backing because the place she was living in, it's like, I actually thought, like, where she was keeping the professor, like, when they show the floor, like, the floor looks like it has seams, like it might open up. That might just be, like, a architectural design to the floor. But I was wondering, like, how does she have the backing that she does? Like, where does the money come from? Like, how do you have the resources that you do? Like, the people, I mean, I guess, everyone has their price, so you just hire, like, people, hence the mercenaries that got you your hook swords and stuff like that, plus the people you hire to go after Peiling's students and her. So, nevertheless, that's some interesting developments on that front. Obviously, Evan and Henry finally meet face to face. I even love Henry being like, so, what's your story with Evan? It's like, X, long story. Why? It's like, his suit. I was just wondering if I could, where I'd kind of find that, suit like it. So it's like, oh, look at you being all jelly and stuff like that. But Evan has a video of Nikki and Henry breaking into Chow's office, as well as because his assistant had said like the place had kind of been broken into, and I was wondering, like, I guess when you're kind of like very like organized like the professor is, like, you will notice when stuff, because the TA probably noticed, like, oh, when stuff isn't like the way he left it, because he's very particular and stuff like that. So I just thought it was interesting, because it's also like the TA kept being like, oh, well, can we meet next Tuesday? I'm like, that's why I'm kind of like, I didn't know if there was something like suspicious on that front, but maybe there's nothing to that. Maybe it's just like, hey, stuff came up. I don't understand the dires of the circumstances of like what's going on, understandably so, considering like you don't know that like the professor has actually been kidnapped and stuff. I mean, obviously like the Singapore police did, and obviously the FBI is working with her, because like that's what they'd be going after her for. So like the charges are stacking, so if they do capture her, there is enough to kind of probably go after her for, but she's kind of eluding them at the time. So but now he's getting someone to Evan's getting someone to look into Henry, which that's why I was kind of like, I don't know, man, Henry, he seems cool, he seems charming, he seems awesome, but it also seems like, well, we don't really know much about Henry, so hopefully we don't get revealed that, like, oh, something super, suspicious. Once again, you don't, it's always, the people closest to you kind of gotta have to watch out for. So we'll have to wait and see kind of on that front where things go. But I'm really interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.